My next guest, he's a legend of the sport of mixed martial arts. He has a record of 23 wins with 10 losses. He holds many accolades in the world of combat sports and is the first ever UFC middleweight champion. Please welcome onto the show, Frank Shamrock. How you doing, Frank?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for taking the time, man. I know you're a busy guy, and
Well, it,
you
it
got a lot of
doesn't
stuff.
look like I've been
All right.
doesn't look like I'm busy right now, but I was
I mean,
I
you
was
you you deserve. You've earned the chance to relax and stuff, but I appreciate that.
yeah, no worries.
Now, Frank, real quick, I know you're a legend of the sport, and a lot of people know who you are. But could you just take a minute to tell the audience that may not be familiar with Frank Shamrock? Who is Frank Shamrock?
Goose. Oh. Well, now I'm like an old, almost 50-year-old guy. But when I was 21, the sport of mixed martial arts started, and I just happened to be there at the right time and have a good mentor who drove me into the sport and martial arts training, and it totally changed my life. Like, went from being a total knucklehead and street criminal to being a professional athlete and traveling the world and fighting and competing. And um, I was very successful in fighting, and am widely considered to be the first complete mixed martial arts fighter. I thought we were all studying, trying to become that. And then, I was very successful on the business side. So I've been able to retire. I spent a lot of time with my daughter and my guard dog,
There you go.
and enjoy a pretty good, healthy life. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Frank. So let me start off with this, Frank. So you went into the world of mixed martial arts at 21 years old. How did martial arts impact you, or what really got you interested in that field?
Well, I was always interested in it. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. So like Bruce Lee and martial arts and stuff was very cool. I remember seeing it and just loving it. And so I had a dream of becoming a professional fighter, or at that time, what I thought would be a professional boxer, because one of my stepdads used to like boxing.
Okay.
So that was the first sport that I saw, and just happened to be a childhood dream of mine. I was, rough and tumble kid, and I didn't like fighting, but I liked competing and training. And so this just happened to be the perfect thing to give me discipline and focus and opportunity, because it was a new sport at the time.
Now, how could you describe, going into the UFC in the earlier days of it? Because I mean, you were there when Ken Shamrock was competing as well in UFC one, correct?
Oh yeah.
How was that experience like? Obviously, like, is it crazy to think back to the UFC and look at it what it is now to what it was back then, and how the sports evolved?
Oh yeah. Yeah, especially because when I came in, I was young. I was 21, 22 years old, and I didn't know anything about sports in general.
Okay.
Like, I didn't play on sports teams. So I didn't get the culture, like, that the whole thing was happening. There was a process. So when I got into the UFC and mixed martial arts early on, I was like, wow, all sports are like this. This is crazy. There's no rules, and the rules change, and
Yeah.
we get kicked out of states and cities, and so it was just crazy. But it was our normal, so it seemed perfectly fine. I knew it was a little sketchy when some of like the Olympic athletes came over, and they're like, this is not how things happen. Like, this is totally, janky. But I could always see the potential in the sport. Like, it's, fighting is beautiful when it's done well, and just seeing the human spirit be tested and, overcome. And then, that whole story arc of entertainment is just fantastic. So I always knew it was going to be hugely successful.
Well, you're definitely right on that end. Now, but you didn't now you didn't debut in the UFC. You debuted for a different organization and you started fighting. But why exactly did you say, "Hey, I'm gonna do MMA and not boxing in specific"?
Had any like martial arts training or anything, so I didn't know the difference of what was what. I really just knew what worked and like what was effective, because otherwise you get cracked, and you get hurt or something. You get caught in a hold. Beauty of martial arts, it's one of those instant lesson teachers, and there's very few things in life that give you that, where you instantly learn, like, oh, that wasn't good.
Yeah, of course.
And then you make changes to it. So, as an athlete and as a student, being of that mindset and being in a sport where you could accomplish that, like, that was super powerful for me, and just kind of allowed me to go, nerd crazy. And when I see fighting, I was terribly afraid of fighting, And because I wasn't involved in like team sports, I didn't get the whole, how the culture is. Like you're rough and you're tough and you do all this stuff. And I was like the sensitive kind of, nerdy kid. So, when I went and competed, like I was scared, I was afraid, I was anxious, I was nervous. I was like all the things you're not supposed to be.
Definitely.
But in a certain way, it helped me perform better because, you find that place of flow and comfort and happiness. And that's what martial arts training gave me. And then you're able to perform and do that. Like that's what it's all about.
Definitely. Now, were you training with Ken as you started your career? Were you a part of the Lions Den when that
Mm-hmm.
part of your career was kicking off and you were getting your first, second, and third professional fight in? Or was that
Yeah.
later?
Yeah. Ken was my first teacher and mentor and instructor. And I trained with him 5-6 days a week. And it was just fascinating. Like it was fascinating because he was, whether he was conscious of it or not, because this new movement was starting, he was trying to mix Western culture and Eastern culture um, in two very established ways. Like he was trying to just blend them together. So it was really cool to be a part of it because he was just doing what he thought he needed to do to get the fighters ready, have the team ready, train himself, like do all the other stuff. But because he trained in Japan, because I trained in Japan, I could see what he was doing. He was teaching these higher lessons about fighting and about martial arts and the values of them. And that's one of the things that really stuck with me with having Ken as a mentor is,
Okay.
learning and understanding the real value of martial arts.
Now, Frank, obviously, you training in mixed martial arts and training with Ken Shamrock. When people, say Ken Shamrock, a lot of people like to make references to the Lions Den, which was their fight camp, and obviously the team that that Ken would use to get ready for his fights. Obviously, it was a lot of tough training through reputation. What was that experience like to be able to train with such a tough team? And really, obviously, a lot of people would make references to brutal training. What do you have to say to that, or what was that experience like for you? Was it as hard as people would say?
It was definitely as hard as people say. I've
Okay.
seen some of the toughest men in the world just break down crying and run out the front door.
Run out the door.
Um, Run out the door, grab their stuff, and just literally run out. The grown man crying. Um, so it was really one of those like hardcore places, but that's what was sort of required at the time because we didn't know a lot about fighting or sport, and all that hadn't really developed. So the key factor was that you were just tough, like super tough, like, and you could take a beating or give a beating or like, there was like a whole psychology to this, you know, getting people to say yes to fighting or, seeing their commitment. And the goal was to like break them physically and then psychologically, and then see if they still want to fight. And if they still do, then they're going to be great fighters.
Definitely. No,
And you can
definitely.
teach them anything.
No, definitely. I mean, you have to just not be tough like physically, but I mean, there's also a
Yeah,
mental game to this, and still to
totally.
today,
Yeah.
mental. It's
Yeah.
crazy. It's crazy. Now, for you, I'm sure at some point you just go crazy doing that kind of training. Does that kind of training wear you out before you even fight, though?
It does. And then you just gotta, your body becomes a machine. And so just like a race car, you got to kind of care for it and build a team and, repairs, and you just kind of keep an eye on it. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's just, I spent 16 years traveling the world, sleeping in hotel rooms and like taking naps on people's couches because I was tired. Because all you do is do physical exercise. And then the recovery for that is to rest.
Of course.
So it's really like but you miss you miss the regular stuff, but that's how you heal.
Definitely. Now, what's your, I'm not gonna say fondest, but what's one of the craziest stories you can tell me from your time training there with Ken at the Lions Den? Crazy story or something that you just wouldn't believe? Because I'm sure obviously through a long time of being there, you gotta have one.
Oh yeah. The things I remember most, as weird as it is like all the weird breaks.
Okay.
Like bones breaking,
Oh,
ankles
okay.
breaking, like fingers dislocating, shoulders dislocating. And um when I was 22, I started teaching martial arts. Like I was young, and no one taught me how to teach martial arts. I was just like, all right, here's what we do. So when someone would get hurt, I felt obligated to try to fix it. And
Of course. Oh, that
so,
fix it. Okay.
so they'd be like,
Got
"Coach, my
doctors in here.
finger," and it would be all crooked and broken. And he'd be like, "Can you fix it?" And I'd be like, "Sure." And I would pull on it because it made sense. Like, how did this happen? And they would tell me, and I'd be like, "Oh, okay."
It's this
So
way,
anyways,
let's go that way.
yeah, so I ended up learning all these weird, crazy like fixes for the human body, including, super gluing eyes and fixing ears and, just all this crazy stuff. Um, and that culminated in one of my friends breaking their leg. And then I cast his leg. Like
Okay.
I was like, no, I got you, man. He's like, well, we can't afford, we were young. He's like, I can't afford, to go get a cast. I'm like, no, I can make a cast. We're
Okay.
good. So we went to our chiropractor. We found on the x-ray that it was a perfect break and it just needed a cast. So I went to the library. It's back when you could check out books on casting. And I checked out a book on casting, learned how to cast his leg and casted him. But those are the memories that I remember, because all of a sudden, you're on this great thing, you're camaraderie with boys, you're in this great community, you're on this great mission, and then all of a sudden someone's arm is facing the other direction, and they're like, Coach, help me with this. You're all, oh gosh. You're like, all right, let me try.
Oh my goodness, that is crazy. You know what? It's obviously times have changed. Right now, you could just Google it on your phone.
Right.
If someone
Yeah.
how to cast something. Obviously, I don't think I would ever Google that, but who knows, right? The internet can save lives. Google can save lives.
Amen to that.
Definitely. Now, Frank. So, my question for you is right now is obviously you've battled adversity. You accomplished a lot of things, and people can think of Frank Shamrock and say first ever, UFC middleweight champion. And the thing that people don't see is obviously the journey. You didn't just go one day and decide, hey, I want to be a fighter. I want to be one of the best in the world. Obviously, it took a lot of work. You're a guy that you overcame adversity, and by overcoming adversity, going back to January 1997, you had lost your third straight fight in a row. There was doubt on you and what you'd be able to accomplish, and you went from that to going into the UFC. And in December of 1997, obviously you beat and you won and you became the middleweight champion at the time. What went through your mind though when you had lost your third fight in a row? Did you doubt yourself and what you'd be able to accomplish there? Was there a lot of doubt that sunk in you?
No, I didn't really doubt.
Okay.
I just didn't. What I realized now that I've had even more hindsight was I just didn't have the tools
Okay.
to be, the best I wanted to be at that time. Because I just, I'd had such a tough childhood, and I went to jail, and I had all these, things happen, and then all of a sudden I'm a professional athlete, and I'm trying to remain focused for, a decade or so.
Of course.
So it's really hard just to stay in that little bubble and stay in that focus, and and then keep learning and keep improving and keep getting better, because that's really what I wanted to do. And so it's only when I saw like, I can't be the best anymore, and this is getting weird, and that's when I really noticed like injuries and things bothering me. Because before that I was like, it's fine,
Yeah.
don't worry about it. But with the birth of my daughter, with me getting older and like seeing all that happen in front of me, I was like, this is a really dangerous and like violent sport, and you got to have an exit. You got to have other skills. Like, this thing could really, literally come to an end at any moment.
Absolutely.
And that was, that's what kind of changed my perspective. It doesn't matter how you grow up, although it makes you, it changes how you feel and think about things and react to things. But, you can really accomplish anything. Like, it just requires someone to think about it. And for me, it always starts with writing it down and making it real. And then, once it's real, then I share it with somebody, because now it's real for them. And it's literally with one idea and just this sort of sharing, practice, trying, doing, the whole thing becomes a business or an event or a nonprofit or a program or a project. And it's that analytical thinking that was super helpful to me in fighting, because it allowed me to see the mechanics of fighting and not be involved in the emotional side of someone trying to beat me up. So when I talk about being a nerd and looking like at fighting as ones and zeros, like it's the human body plus technique plus speed, like, attrition. And then the last piece is like, what can you do with your psyche and your mind? Are there barriers? Are there, is the potential unlimited? Like, where are you living in your mind? And, this is what I tell a lot of people who are, looking to change their life. You got to change your mind, because it got that way through whatever. But now that's how you think, that's how you feel, that's how you react, that's how you act. And so you need to look for things that change your mind, whether it's, artistic or physical or, social or spiritual. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, but you know, I think we're always leveling up as people and as human beings. And you know, martial arts is that thing that connects your mind, your body, and your spirit with other people. And so it's such a powerful medium to like get people connected and together and creating, you know, community, family growth, you know, social advancement. That's stuff that I think about.
Definitely. Now, was all that going? Obviously, you're a very smart individual. Was all that stuff, going through your head though, at that point of your career though?
um Not really, because my career really went in, you know, 16 years, but I had 3 of, you know, 5-year phases.
Of
The
course.
first 5 years I became famous and, you know, achieved all this stuff, and then, you know, the second 5 years the sport depressed and there wasn't an audience. And so, you know, I changed my role to be more than a fighter. I became a spokesman and a broadcaster and a media person.
Yeah.
So, you know, I just kept evolving as the sport kept evolving. But I always saw its potential because I could see it. You know, like I would go to Alabama somewhere in the fairgrounds and sit next to some 90-year-old woman, and she would be, you know, feeble and, you know, worried, and her grandson's fighting and telling me these stories, you know, because we're Alabama and we're just, you know, having a social evening. And then, you know, she'd be like, I can't watch, you know, oh, tell me when they're calling him. And then, you know, 10 minutes later, she'd be like, kick his ass, and just lose her mind, like absolutely go like granny crazy. And I'd be like, there's something very magical about what we're doing, because it allows people to go on that journey and participate and express something and then be a part of it. And, you know, that whole thing, it always just felt really good. Even though we were beating each other up, even though it's very dangerous, it felt good. Like we left the arena, the building, whatever, and it's like, that was good. Like we helped, you know, we entertained, we, you know, brought stories, like we did stuff, and it was good.
Definitely. Now, let me shift to this. As the sport is evolved, and you were correct. This sport just blew up into something special. Fighting is an art. Fighting is beautiful. Obviously, there is thrill and there's agony in the sport. It comes with it, right? It's normal. But like for you now, and maybe you didn't think about it. You couldn't have thought about it at the time, or maybe you did. But now looking back, though, it's 2021. You see the UFC and what it is. You ever just tell yourself, man, like I am the first ever UFC middleweight champion. Like, and obviously that belt was turned into the light heavyweight championship. But does that like accomplishment stick out to you in your mind and tell yourself like this is crazy? Like this huge
Uh,
company, I was the first ever.
I mean, all of them, the UFC, Strike Force, you know, WC, like all the belts that
W.
I won, like I was just on my journey. Like, okay, I got to become the best. I got to become the complete martial artist, because that was like that. I thought that was the game. Like, I thought we were
Of
all
course.
playing this game. Bruce Lee was the master, and we were going to find the way. And so, like, you know, I was deep into this martial study. Um, you know, kind of with the modern physics of the human body, because I studied bodybuilding and biomechanics and stuff. So I had this, you know, modern awareness and knowledge of the body with this kind of, you know, Eastern, you know, mindset towards martial arts. So for me, like, and I'm good at reading people. So if you told me something, hey, this is how this is, I'd be like, oh, okay, cool. And my brain would absorb it. My body would do it a few times. And I'd be like, okay, this is my thoughts on this technique. And I'd have that instant, you know, evaluation, like we talked about earlier, like, hey, does this feel good? Does this feel right? Whatever. Um, and it was only through this process of like, hey, I started asking questions and people would tell me answers that I knew they didn't know was the truth. You know, so they would, to save face or to, you know, whatever the reason is, I'd say, hey, 1 + 1 is 1, right? And they'd be like, no, it's actually 3. And I'd be like, what? I don't understand.
One plus
I'd be like, are you sure? They'd be like, 100%. We've been doing this for 100 years.
without
And
flinching, they tell you that
yeah,
100%.
100%, because their master told them that, and their master told them that. And nowhere along the line are you encouraged to ask questions. And because I wasn't from martial arts or sports, I'm like, hey, I got a question. And at the beginning, they would just beat me up because they'd be like, man, he won't stop asking questions. And so they would beat me up. But it made me get better and better. And then I just learned how to ask the question better and differently, so that I could get the information I needed. Because sometimes they didn't even know why I was asking a question. Like, well, that's a stupid question. Why would you ask that?
the whole there is no such thing as stupid questions thing, right? They should have told him that. I've always if you told me the answer, I'd be like, okay, well, why isn't this the answer?
Right.
Okay, and why isn't that the answer? I'd always find growing up, I'd always find like 5 or 6 different ways of asking, like, why isn't that the answer? So what happens if I don't do this? I'm always looking for the why, so I could definitely relate to that.
Yeah. Big Y guy.
Big
Big passions.
big why. Now, Frank, let me go back to your Lions Den experience here. Now, at some point, you're training, and you're a young guy. You're progressing through your career. There's again doubt going on. You're able to finish that year as the middleweight champion, and obviously you're progressing. Now, were there like disagreements though between you and the way the Lions then was handling stuff though? I mean, where you're alluding to how tough it was and everything that happened and how intense that training was at some point. Because I read reports. Obviously, I was a little younger. I was a little younger side, so I still couldn't keep up with these things as they were going on. The internet wasn't as crazy as it was.
It wasn't as developed back
Yeah,
then.
we couldn't. I mean, you couldn't YouTube. Now you could YouTube fighters
Yeah.
from all over the world and obviously not find talent. But going
Yep.
back to the question here, did you disagree with a lot of methods that were going on, Frank, or did you have your own idea and perspective on how things should be handled? And you don't have to
Yeah.
answer that question.
Yeah. No, not at all. Yeah. I slowly began to question like some of the principles and stuff because I considered myself a man of sports and science. And science is real simple. Human body's the same. It all works the same. And so for me, I had this very like scholastic and then physical, academic approach to like this whole study. Nobody else had that. Like everyone else was tough, and they didn't worry about that stuff. And, they would
Don't worry about
smack
that.
me on the head. Yeah, they'd be like, nobody else has got a notebook. What's wrong with you? And
What's Google?
what?
That's Google.
Right. But it enabled me to kind of have a different perspective to it because I wasn't tied up on the machismo side. I wasn't tied up in being a tough guy or, I earnestly was like, well, I don't want to get hurt and I don't really know the answer. So I should ask. And like half the time I'd get beat, but I'd be like, oh, it's totally worth it because now I know.
Of course.
And like the next guy's not going to get me there and hurt me. I'm going to be like, nah, because I know this. So I was like, it's this weird give and take of like pain and learning. And then, I just got in this mindset of seeing the sport differently. I saw all the holes as to how the styles didn't line up, as opposed to everyone else was looking at it like, hey, my style is strongest because of these things that line up. And I was like, yeah, but the human body is the same. Everyone has the same human body. So it should start there and then work its way out. And so I had this different mindset. And once I got that and I started studying all the individual styles, I saw all the holes and I saw all the areas where no one had connected them because of their mindset or their world or whatever. So I went on this real journey of I would show up in their world and be like, hey, I got a question.
Yeah.
And then, they either hated me or they liked me because I was the only one who was trying to move thought forward. But it was all self-preservation. I was terrified of fighting, and fighting is, it's a great physical exertion and presentation, but it's really violent. It's really dangerous. And it's like, you can't unsee the risk once you've participated in it. So when I watch it, I'm not, like the Conor McGregor leg break thing. I didn't watch it. I saw him flapping and I was like, nope, well, I'm not going to look away. I'm looking away. I'm not going to see it.
Okay.
Because it's like, that to me is the reality. Like that's what can happen. And then, for the next 50 years of your life, you've got a cane and you're, one leg shorter than the other. It's like, that's something that I never wanted to happen to me. Shouldn't happen to anybody if possible. And, with good training, good foresight, good caring for the body, all that stuff should be foreseeable and avoidable. And, until you reach a certain age, like I never got hurt.
Okay.
Until I hit like 35. And then I was like, oh, I'm just falling apart at the seams. But your body has this amazing ability to regenerate itself. And, once it's trained and it's ready, like, you can just turn it off and on.
Now, were you part of the Lions Den when you won the middleweight championship, or were you already doing your own thing?
I had just left. Yeah, it was just prior to that I left. And back to your question about different philosophies and stuff. Like to me, it was you write everything down, you study like you're going to school, and that mindset was completely foreign to this culture. And I was just like, wow, this is so weird. And I just left prison where it was foreign to people in prison. They're like, what are you doing? What are you studying shit for? Like, you don't need that. I was like, no, I'm going to be something. It's amazing.
Oh snap! You don't need that.
You don't need that. What are you doing? We're all convicts. And so, you know, fighting smart, being smart, taking care of your body, like to me, it was all this a human journey, because my goal is to live to be like 100 plus. And to do that, I got to undo 16 years of terrible stuff I did to my body, and then another 10 years, you know, of just being a knucklehead, just to have a good life and to be, you know, healthy and enjoy the rest of my life. But like for me, I wake up every day, first thing in the morning, and I pray, and then I like do this physical examination of my own body, and it's like it never happened. Like I have no injuries, I have no pains.
Okay.
So it's the bizarre thing. Now, if I go try to play baseball or I wrestle with my friend or something, I'll feel like I'm a, you know, 48-year-old, you know, retired fighter. But if I don't, like I feel fantastic. Like
You're 20.
like it literally never happened. Yeah.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Now, going in MMA, now in MMA, you've had plenty of encounters, right? You know, some were, you know, one-sided and some were absolute wars. You know, you fought Tito Ortiz in what many consider one of the greatest matches in the sport. To you, Frank, what memory in the sport really sticks out to you? What's something that you hold special to your heart, in your heart?
Well, the Tito moment was huge.
Yeah.
You know, it was for that time the biggest stage that it had existed. Like it was a big moment for our sport at that time. And then, you know, we both put on a very modern, athletic, you know, enjoyable performance. But yeah, so Tito is probably one or two I'm most memorable, and then the other one is a guy named Insen Inoue, who I fought in Valley Tudo, Japan, 1998.
Okay.
And you know, I grew up on the streets. Like I'd fight on the streets, and you know, I wasn't angry, but I wasn't, you know, I wasn't like a wimp. You know, I didn't back down. You know, people didn't mess with me because they knew that I was not mess with a bull.
Oh yeah, someone that you just don't mess with.
No, they'd be like, no, he seems nice, but so yeah, I forgot what I was talking about.
Oh, your memorable moment in MMA.
Oh yeah. So so when I'm fighting Enson Inoue, he's a big, strong guy, and he clubs me, and he, you know, gets on top of me. And I genuinely thought myself as a tough guy. You know, I had all these life experiences. That, you know, I paroled out of like Folsom Prison. Like I was like, you know, tough guy. And then my first day of training with Ken, like I realized I know nothing about fighting, and I'm just gonna get, you know, I just get ragdolled and I just get abused. So to go through that whole cycle of then learning how to fight and having a skill set and, you know, starting to believe in it and like being right on the cusp of that, that was like a big thing for me. So I was always like building, and then I was right there. And so right when I fought Ensign, I was right there. I was like right at that spot. And I'd lost a fight a few months earlier, and I was like, really, like, what am I going to do here, you know, with this career? And you know, I get in this position where he mounts me and he's like elbowing my head in. And it's like the worst case scenario. Like everyone's like, oh yeah, Frank's done. Oh, it's yeah, all right, good deal. And I had that moment, which I think a lot of fighters have, where they, you know, the reality of the moment sets in, and then they doubt themselves. And my doubt, which didn't bring itself to surface for me to understand until that time, was that someone was going to kill me, like in a street fight. Like that was my fear, right? Because I was always in this, like I grew up on the streets and in prisons, and so I was like, yeah, the probability of me dying in a street fight are like really high. So then when I started doing this professionally, I still had that same intensity. Like this guy's going to try to kill me, and so I brought that fear with me, and then I also brought the intention of, well, you know, if he's going to try to kill me, I'm going to try to kill him. And so I never, you know, I'd never really committed to the sport. And but when I mean by committed, it's the end of the story. I never committed everything because I was like, oh, you know, what if I kill somebody? Like, what if this happens? And what if this happens? And what if this happens? And the real question should have been, what if I become the greatest and all my dreams come true? Because that's what any normal person would ask. But it was through this process. So when I get in this position and I think I'm going to lose, and I have this moment and I look at it and I'm like, I'm going to die. This is my moment. How do I feel about this? What am I going to do? And then I was like, wait a minute, this guy, nobody's going to kill me. And it was like just mental like change where my brain went, that's ridiculous, and then, what flooded after was all these, energies and endorphins and images and visuals of me doing all this training and all this stuff and everything that had transpired for me to get to this point right there. And I just blasted up and eventually knocked him out. And it was just this huge, knockdown, drag out, Rocky like moment. But it was that one moment of doubt where I had two things happen. I faced this fear because I was literally afraid someone was going to kill me because I was living this crazy life. And then I was also afraid to accept it and like be great. Like I was like, yeah, but what if
you accomplish it?
Right. What if then what am I going to do with all my time, all my energy? But it was in accepting that. And then when I came out of that fight, I was like, nobody's ever going to kill me. Like there's nobody walking around who feels has done all this. Who's going to look me in the eye and be like, I'm going to mess with that guy. Like it doesn't happen.
Let's go. Definitely. Frank, last two questions before we get to the end here. So you talk about Bruce Lee and growing up and watching, those Bruce Lee movies. I'm sure you did. What's your favorite moment from Bruce Lee, who was a true martial artist?
And the stuff that mesmerized me when I was little, I like all the nunchucks and the gadgets and stuff, but it was just the way he moved his hands, like the fluidity of it.
Okay.
Because up until that time, it was like boxing and football, and everything's very angular and mechanical looking from this perspective. And then to see him and then to have that kind of mystical thing. And then the broken English really worked for him because it was like, only the words necessary.
Yeah.
It's like when Yoda spoke, you'd be like, did I hear that correctly? Yeah. So he had that thing about him that I thought was just, and I'm sure millions of, young boys did the exact same thing. But seeing him perform, and then, I looked like, by the time I was like 12, like I started to get shredded. Like as soon as testosterone hit my body was like, you're a genetic freak. So when I looked at him, I was like, wait a minute, I have weird stuff like that. And so there was a lot for me to like relate to. And then, like I said, Mexican boxing too was, watching those guys battle and then give their speech and like the whole pageantry, that to me was how you presented this combat sports thing.
Definitely. I love the 1-inch punch.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All that stuff. Like it's just amazing.
Being like water.
Yeah. And it's just amazing. And I've traveled, I've literally trained with thousands and thousands of people. And, there are people that are masters at this stuff. And it's extraordinary. It's so powerful, to see the personal commitment, dedication. And then, conversely, when they use it for something like self-defense or, whatever, like it's so neat to see.
And Enter the Dragon wasn't a bad movie either.
Yeah.
Enter the Dragon. You gotta I had to throw one in there. I had to throw one in. I love that. Now, Frank, moving on to this, Frank, why'd you retire? When you decided to finally retire, why or how did you know it was time for you to walk away from the sport, like as an active competitor?
Well, it was time for me when I couldn't perform, at my best. Okay. My machine, my body didn't like whatever I was doing and how it was situated. But yeah, it was just the last few years I was in constant pain. I was constantly getting injured. And I didn't want my life to be that. And then my daughter was born right around the same time.
Okay.
And it was a very vivid moment where I'd broken my arm in the Kung Lee fight. And I had this like bone stimulator cage thing on my arm. And I'm going to scoop up my infant daughter. And I look at all this stuff and there's a cord to my waist with a battery pack and like all this. And I'm like, what the hell? What is happening? What do I really want to do with my life? And, I realized like my end is coming. It's inevitable. I got all these other skills, and what I really want to do is be a dad, hang out with my daughter, and like experience that life I didn't get to. So, those couple of factors, once I sat down with everybody and I was like, guys, like I don't want to fight nobody.
Okay. Now, Frank, is there any advice you can give somebody that from a legend like yourself, that has doubt, that has negativity going through them because of them getting passed up for a job, or them struggling to reach their potential, or try to get them hitting their goals? Is there any advice you could offer from a legend like yourself?
For sure. Yeah. First one is you just can't give up,
Okay.
and if you talk about fighting, like if someone gets your leg and they're going to break it, that's time to give up.
Okay.
But if it's someone saying no to a job interview, or I'm busy right now, or whatever, that's 100% follow up 100 times. Like that's how you become successful. It's just, you just keep showing up, and eventually someone turns and says, hey, what is he doing here? Put him to work. Like, let's get going here. Let's get this thing cracking. So I tell everyone, just, you got to show up. Like, you got to show up, and you got to be ready, and that's got to be your passion, and your dream. And you can find that by writing and praying and living in a spiritual space, because that's what you'll be dreaming about doing. And then once you're doing that, the rest of it's crazy, gravy. You just hang out, enjoy your life, do good things. And then if a war breaks out, you're all trained and ready. You're like, oh, I'm good. Put me in, coach. So, if a self-defense situation breaks out, you're all ready. And when people ask me about my career, like, what's the biggest takeaway? What meant the most to you? The belts, the money, like the accolades, being this, being that. And I'm like, no, man. The best thing for me is I walk down the street and I'm like, nobody kicked my ass. Like, I'm not like going, oh, that guy's known that. No, I'm like, hey, how's everybody
to rob
doing?
that guy. Let's stay away from that guy. Let's not try to mess with that guy today.
Yeah. I tell people that want to get into martial arts, I was like, imagine that feeling where you're just like, hey, I feel good about this, because you have training and understanding of what to do in a situation that you are uncomfortable. So
definitely. What can people expect from Frank Shamrock in the future?
Want to make more movies. I really like the digital medium for telling stories. So expect another mental health series or docu-series, and doing a new organic green supplement, which I'm really excited about, called Morning Man Greens, because I used to drink like 7 cups of coffee every day.
Same.
And I went and saw my doctor. He's like, you can't drink 7 cups. Even you can't drink 7 cups of coffee a day.
Okay.
And he's like, you got to find some alternative. I was like, I know, I'd love to just get jacked up and like run around and do all this work. And he's like, nah, you got to figure out some other things. So I started putting it out in the universe, and ended up partnering up with 2 guys, Brent and John. And we launched this all organic morning greens drink for men, specifically for men, by men, about men. And it's all fun, machismo, tongue-in-cheek men's marketing. But our deeper mission is to teach men how to be men, fathers, husbands, and really, use our, bump elbows and chuckle to open up a real conversation about what it means to be a man, as a young man, as a, middle man, as a father, and until the end. And I think that's something that's missing in our culture. We think fighting is this, or, we think all these different things, but a lot of developed cultures, a lot of ancient cultures, they have these rituals for, men becoming men. And, I feel like we need more of those, and we need more of those that people want to do, that are, hey, this is a good thing. This is a lesson thing. This is a man thing. And I think it'll make us better sons, fathers, husbands, dads.
Definitely can't wait to check it out. Is there, as we're gonna wrap up the episode, Frank, is there anything you want to let the audience know?
I have weirdly soft skin.
Okay.
Like,
I do too.
Really?
I do.
Are you just, you're Hispanic, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it's a Hispanic thing, because I used to wrestle with people all over the world, and they would stop and be like, Mr. Shamrock, you have really soft skin. I'm like, what a weird thing to say after you're like wrestling with a grown man. Like, that's so bizarre.
Yeah, that's the only thing you want to hear.
that's the last thing I wanted to hear. But then I started realizing like men are rough and they're like scratchy and I'm like soft. And so
Hispanic thing.
yeah, I think it's a Hispanic thing. But since that time, I've had several women say, "You have really soft skin." So now I'm like believing it. But anyways, that's something that most people don't know about me.
There you go. Thank you for your time, Frank Shamrock, folks. Thanks for listening to the interview. Again, thanks again, Frank, for joining us on the show today. And to everyone out there, please stay safe, folks. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you later, guys. Goodbye.